아, 안녕하세요. 오늘은 화요일 야간 출근 끝나고 아, 왔는데 잠을 잤습니다. 그래서 또 계속 자서 저녁에 출근하기 전에 운동할까 했는데 또 지금 막상 샤워하고 하니까 잠이 싹 깨가지고 지금 운동을 하려고 합니다. 간단하게 팔굽혀펴기 20개씩 5세트만 하겠습니다. 또 운동하려니까 또 졸리네. 운동할 때는 CNN이죠.
Going to be a day that Donald Trump is going to rue for a long time. This is just the beginning of what will be a very long process. But again, I have to take some pleasure in the fact that Donald Trump's Supreme Court, the three justices that he put on the court and pushed for so hard, were part of the team that was responsible for making this day happen.
Didn't save him. Didn't save him at all. So listen,
Didn't say.
Anthony. Trump spent years fighting to keep this information private. What do you think he's most afraid of getting out?
Well, it's already gotten out, and Mary Trump wrote about it, and the New York Times has written about it. He overstated.
Mary Trump just told Chris, that he's been committing tax fraud for decades, but that's what she said.
But she also wrote about it. Yeah, but she wrote about it in her book. But if you go through the analysis, some of these think tanks have gone through the analysis. He's overstated the income for purposes of getting mortgages and loans on those buildings, and he understated it for purposes of filing his tax return. So, that's a felony. That comes with many, many years in jail. And he's got a lot of people that are around him that are involved with it. Now, the question is, did he silently pardon himself and his family members, Don? We're not going to know that until the case gets into the red zone. So we'll have to see if that happened. My guess is that he probably pardoned some people. I'm not so sure if he went as far as pardoning himself, but my bet is that he pardoned some people around him. But remember, anybody that's been pardoned, and once that's found out, they no longer have the Fifth Amendment right. So he's sort of on that balancing beam there. If I pardon people, they can testify. They have no protection not to. And if I don't pardon them, some of them may go to jail. So, trust me, he's thinking about it every day. I do disagree with Mary on that. She probably knows him better than me, but not by much. I think he is whacked out with anxiety over this thing. He'll try to play it off by playing golf and saying nonsensical things now in his post-presidential statements. But I think he's loaded up with anxiety over this.
Was that a nod of agreement, William?
Oh, Anthony is spot on. Absolutely. And don't forget, you've got people like Michael Cohen, who was by his side, who can be, Cy Vance has subpoena power. Michael Cohen can be subpoenaed. Alan Weisselberg, who is the chief accountant of the Trump organization, can be subpoenaed, I assume. These people are going to help and be incredibly important to FTI Consulting that Cy Vance has hired, and Mr. Pomerantz, the new attorney that he's hired. But he has an excellent team around him. Again, this is a very, very bad day for Donald Trump. This is probably his worst nightmare. He's got, millions of documents to go through, and they're going to find what they're looking for. I'm convinced.
As close as you can get to a yes, one-word answer, William. What about his kids? Two of his kids are still running his company. There's another company owned by Ivanka Trump that's part of it as well. Is children facing trouble?
Well, I mean, this consulting arrangement that Ivanka had when she was supposedly on the payroll is very devious sounding and mysterious, that the New York Times reported on. I think that's going to be a problem for Ivanka Trump.
So, Anthony, Trump is facing multiple legal problems, both civil and criminal, but his grip on the GOP still seems really strong right now. Could any revelations from these investigations change anything?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, once he's indicted, that probably won't change it. But if he pleads out, or if there's a guilty conviction, I think it's over for him. But remember, the CPAC guys are just like him. I mean, they're playing the money game. They know there's a 15 to 20% fringe, Don, that will pour money into the nonsense that President Trump is spouting. That's good for CPAC in the short term. It's good for that fringe of the party in the short term, but it's very, very bad for them in the long term because normal people are disaffecting from the party.
Yeah, great conversation. We'll continue as this goes on. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. 165 bills, 33 states. Republicans across the country are pushing bills that make it harder to vote. Why are they doing that? Some of the things that they say would make voting safer are actively targeting black voters. Stacey Abrams is here. She weighs in next.
The garden was built more than 360 years ago and been owned by the Tokugawa shogunate most of the time as the second residence.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Eleni Jokas, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections between people, places, and projects are revolutionizing commerce in Africa.
All new Connecting Africa on CNN. In association with Afrexim Bank. I'm the manager of the Retail and Business Banking Department of an international bank in Cameroon. Nothing really prepared us for a crisis as hard as this one. So when it started, my greatest fear was that my teammates and my colleagues and the staff members find themselves hit by an emotional toll too heavy for them to bear. So we had to implement brutal changes to make sure people kept the feeling of being safe while working. So I had to make adjustments at the personal level as well, because not only people looked up to me as a manager to be able to find motivation to go through the situation themselves, but again, I had to go through it with a family that lives far apart from here. I had to parent my kids through the phone and work through homeworks, sometimes late at night when I'm done from working. Now, my hopes for the future is that as the world reconstructs and recovers from the pandemics, that we as a collective unit build a more people-centered world, and that the quality of our overall decisions reflect the lessons we learned from this pandemic.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
So here's what that signal that the Supreme Court sent today, that they're not interested in cases dealing with the 2020 election results, rejecting an election appeal from Pennsylvania Republicans. 3 justices dissenting, including Clarence Thomas, who in his 11-page dissent parroted some of Trump's baseless claims and his big lie about his big lie of election fraud. So Justice Thomas questioning the reliability of mail-in ballots despite no evidence, none of widespread fraud. And then writing this: we are fortunate that many of the cases we have seen alleged only improper rule changes, not fraud. But that observation provides only small comfort. An election free from strong evidence of systemic fraud is not alone sufficient for election competence. Also important is the assurance that fraud will not go undetected. So joining me now is Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is the founder of Fair Fight Action and the author of Our Time Is Now. Good to see you, Leader Abrams. I'm so happy that you're here. Let's talk about this. Are you surprised by Justice Thomas showing sympathy for Trump and others in this dissent that he wrote?
Not at all. Both Justice Thomas and his wife have unfortunately shown sympathies with the unproven allegations of fraud, but more concerningly, the refusal to accept the evidence of their eyes, which is that nothing happened other than mitigation of voter suppression, which has been the law of the land for too long.
One of the states Trump targeted in his big lie was Georgia, and you know Georgia very well. Republicans there are now pushing a bill that would restrict voting, eliminate Sunday polling, which is, of course, a big factor, right? Many African Americans go to souls to the polls, right? And then they want to limit the use of drop boxes. I'm sure you're going to fight this. What are you going to do?
Well, let's be clear. This is the omnibus version of the House consolidation of voter suppression bills. There's actually more than 24 bills that have been introduced. I think the number now stands at 25 or 26. But the reality is that they've spent most of this legislative session trying to fix a problem that they almost uniformly said did not exist. And the cheerleaders for this voter suppression activity are Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, and Brian Kemp, the governor, the two who were lauded by so many for their stalwart protection of the right to vote. I was always very clear that they weren't protecting the right to vote. They were protecting the system that they created. And now that that system has worked for too many voters in their estimation, they're working hard to rescind access to the ballot. They're working to shut down polling places again by eliminating the number of days of early voting. Limits on precincts. They're doing their best to eliminate Sunday voting. 71,000 Georgians took advantage of that, including 36.7% of whom were African American. They specifically have said throughout the Republican Party that the only way to win elections going forward would be to actually limit access to the ballot. That was said by the chair of the Gwinnett County Board of Elections, the second largest county in our state. And so what's happening in Georgia is actually being replicated in Texas, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania.
Well, it's 33 states proposing. Let me just get clear for our viewers, and then I'll let you respond. Yeah. But bills like this one in Georgia, and you just mentioned some of it in Texas and Arizona, they're proposing 33 states are proposing more than 165 bills to make election law changes. Do you think Republicans could actually win back the House and Senate if laws like this pass? Go on.
They absolutely can. And that was going to be my point, that we've seen the most egregious bills come out of the states that were either closest or that actually flipped. So Pennsylvania, which had gone Republican in 2016, went for Joe Biden in 2020. The same in Arizona and in Georgia. And what we're seeing is that across the country, in states where there were close elections or where they fear close elections, their solution is not to improve their policies or to improve their responses to the needs of the people. Their response is to make it harder for the people to participate. The only solution that I see right now, given the extreme gerrymandering that exists in many of these states, is that we pass H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which will provide a floor for democracy in America.
오늘 날씨가 너무 좋네요.
No longer will geography determine the
화요일이니까
quality of your
다들
citizenship. Because
출근하셨겠죠?
right now, American citizens who are eligible to vote are treated vastly differently depending on where they live the day they decide to participate in our democracy.
I want to talk about this former Senator Kelly Loeffler today launching her Greater Georgia group to boost voter registration. It looks like the GOP answer to your organization and what she's doing. Are you worried about what she's doing?
If the GOP answer to expanding the access to our democracy and defending the fundamentals of our democracy is to do something that's counter, that should be something that every patriot in America pushes back against. I welcome anyone who actually wants to encourage access to the vote, anyone who wants to make certain that every eligible voter can cast their ballot and have those ballots counted. But what Kelly Loeffler and her allies in the GOP have said in Georgia and elsewhere is they don't want every Georgian to vote. They want the Georgians they like to vote. She was very specific that their target is going to be partisan registration of only conservative voters. The work that we did in Georgia was to encourage and protect democracy for everyone. And so if Kelly Loeffler intends to actually serve all of Georgia, she is welcome to join the fight. But if her fight is going to be to limit access to the right to vote in Georgia, she's got a big fight coming.
I don't understand. It just seems undemocratic and un-American to try to limit people's access to the polling place, the voting booth, because that's a fundamental right in the Constitution, protected by the Constitution. So why do you think people like Kelly Loeffler? Let's just say that Kelly Loeffler is out there fighting for everyone to have as much access, right, as possible. That would be fine. But then you have the other things, like these other bills, 165 bills to change these laws and try to limit voting. Why can't they just get out there and do what you're doing, what LaTosha Brown is doing, and try to get as many people access to the polling places as possible instead of trying to limit people?
First of all, the Constitution doesn't actually guarantee us the right to vote. What the Constitution does is preclude certain categories of voters from being denied the right to vote. And so the 15th Amendment guarantees that blacks have the right to vote. The 19th Amendment said the same for women. It was the 26th Amendment that said that for young people between the ages of 18 and 21. But the reality is we have a system that is fractured and divisive that delegates to the states and relegates the power to the states to determine who actually has access to the ballot. And what we see happening with Kelly Loeffler and her ilk is that they are returning to what has worked for so many in times when demographics are changing and when power is shifting. Instead of updating their beliefs and their policies to meet the moment, they instead try to remove people from participation. That's why Insay Ufot, who runs the New Georgia Project, LaTosha Brown, Helen Butler, the leaders of Asians American Advancing Justice and Mahente, and so many other groups have been working hard to expand access to the right to vote. It's only eligible citizens who will ever be able to cast the ballot, but it should be every eligible citizen that we should want to participate. And it is deeply disappointing to me, in fact, it is deeply disheartening that a former U.S. Senator would spend her time and her resources to publicly engage in, once again, the type of conspiracy theories that say that only certain Americans should be valued and have their votes counted. And that's what Kelly Loeffler is proposing. But I can't be surprised that she accepted the support of Marjorie Taylor Greene, a QAnon conspiracy theorist, because in her mind, winning at all costs is more important than protecting the United States and the fundamentals of our democracy.
I'm glad you clarified what I said about the Constitution. That is why John Lewis fought so hard for the Voting Rights Act, and people are fighting for that. Stacey Abrams, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
More than 500,000 friends, parents, siblings, neighbors lost to coronavirus. Stay with us.
تحياتنا للأصدقاء في النجوم. يا ليت يجمعنا الزمان.
If we could introduce ourselves to an alien life form, what would we say?
Hello from the children of planet Earth. Здравствуйте, приветствую вас.
What you're doing is something very important, as you are trying to make contact with another civilization.
Both voyages carry a copper phonograph record. A message. Celebrating the sights and sounds of Earth.
I was looking for images for 100 different topics. Agriculture, families, science, medicine. Sports was only one, that if you were to choose one sporting event that was global and perhaps most representative of humanity, it would be the Olympics. And if you were to choose one athletic that was basic to all sports, probably running.
And what if the athletes chosen to represent humanity were never told, and they didn't learn the truth until decades later? This will outlive our planet. I just wonder how you feel about that.
Wow.
It's just not something that you can't wrap your mind around, but your heart can and your imagination can.
In the DMZ between North and South Korea.
In Shanghai, China.
In New Delhi. In Beirut.
In Riyadh.
In Somaliland. Moscow. And Downing Street.
In Sao Paulo, Brazil.
I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta in Atlanta. This is CNN.
This is the 100 Club, our look at companies that are 100 years old or older. Across the lush bluegrass pastures and limestone-bedded forests of central Kentucky, one name reigns supreme.
What are y'all drinking?
It's almost like a pilgrimage for some folks who are very loyal fans, come from all over the world to see where their Jim Beam bourbon's made.
Fred No is master distiller. For him, bourbon is a family business, and the bloodlines trace all the way back to 1795 when Jacob Beam sold the first barrel.
You know, Jacob Beam started off making just a little bit of whiskey, maybe 1 barrel a day if he was lucky.
Bourbon is now an $8.5 billion industry in the U.S. state of Kentucky, where 95% of the world's bourbon is made.
Tonight, more than 500,000 Americans are dead because of the coronavirus. Over the past year on this program, we have heard the heartbreaking stories of Americans grieving for loved ones. We met Sophia Burke, a nurse from New Jersey who contracted COVID. 7 of the 8 members of her household came down with it. Her 93-year-old father did not survive. I spoke to Sean and Brandon Blackwell, brothers who lost both of their parents to COVID. Paul and Rosemary Blackwell of Texas died together, holding each other's hands.
You know, it still just seems unreal. Like me and my brother were talking earlier, like my mom's and dad are just gonna walk through that door any second. But, you know, we know that they're not, and it's just a hard decision, like I said, that any child has to make for their parents. And like I said, I'm just glad that my brother was there with me, and I was able to lean on him as he was able to lean on me, because that was just a crazy experience.
And there was also Lisette Vallejo,
마지막 발표팩에 20개만 하고 끝내겠습니다.
and her father-in-law to coronavirus. They were both doctors.
얼마나 했죠? 24분,
My
25분.
husband is my hero. I miss him very much. He was a very kind person. He would go out of the way to help any human being. At any time of the day, he would wake up and go to the hospital and help anybody. When it was the COVID section, he would tell me I need to go see my patient. And I was like trying to be careful, and he goes, no, I don't miss people, these are my family. And he would spend every day going to the hospital in the front line, helping another human being. And for me, I'm really devastated losing him.